On this week's 51%, we speak with artists who have found healing through creativity. And we get a taste of pianist and composer Robin Spielberg's new record, By Way of the Wind.
May we all be one step closer to the person we want to ultimately be.
WAMC's Josh Landis also speaks with the organizer of a Pittsfield, Massachusetts art show highlighting the work of breast cancer survivors. I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jessie King. A few weeks ago, we spoke with a group of women using art to process and express their grief from struggling with infertility. And we're going to continue along those lines today. As we heard from the co-authors of Infertilities, the creative process, as frustrating as it can sometimes be, can also help us find healing and relief. That was certainly the case for author Brittany Means, who is already receiving praise for her debut memoir, Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways. Means is the survivor of a devastating childhood, rife with poverty, violence, abuse, and neglect. When she wasn't at the barn, her highly religious grandparents' cluttered mansion in Indiana, Means lived on the road with her mother, bouncing between shelters and motels. Means' mother struggled with substance abuse and a string of unhealthy relationships, and when Means would ask her where they were going, often the response was, "To hell if we don't change our ways." Means' first book takes an unflinching but compassionate look at her family and her early life, and how she managed to break the cycle and get away from it. Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways is maybe not the book Means imagined herself writing as an adult, but she says it was critical to her healing process, and she hopes her story can help others.
You know, when I was a kid, I read books and they would have descriptions of like people manipulating people or abusing other characters, and seeing it in specific words was really important for me, because it made me feel like this isn't just some weird thing that happens in my life. This is something that happens to other people. And, you know, you can put it into words and describe it, and maybe it's not okay that it's happening, or maybe there's something I can think about differently or do differently. So I wanted to do that for people who came to my book.
You take a pretty unflinching look at the things you faced growing up. You know, you don't sugarcoat any of it. It's one thing to look back on those moments as an adult, but what do you think it meant as a child to experience this kind of abuse and neglect?
I think my brain formed around trauma and around instability. And so, you know, I believe in healing and finding hope and recovery. I also think my brain's just a little weird and I process things a little weird. And yeah, as a kid, I didn't think to question most things, the events of the book. You know, the moving around, people yelling and stomping, to me, that was just what I knew. And it wasn't until I was processing them as I got older that it really struck me that anything was weird, or just how wrong things were. Like originally, if something was wrong and someone was acknowledging that it was wrong, I internalized that as I must be doing something wrong. And then I think a lot of it locked in when I was a teenager, which is when you start to really become more self-possessed and have a sense that you should actually have some power in your life. And I really didn't. I don't think a lot of teenagers do, but I became more aware of like exactly how I didn't have power in my life. So yeah, I think kids in that situation often don't have a concept that what they're going through is even anything abnormal. And it's a weird experience growing up and remembering something that was just a given and having to realize like, that was kind of messed up.
Well, now, of course, you're in a much better place. You're in a healthier relationship. You know, I guess looking back on that time, what was it that you think helped you through it?
A lot of it was having really good people in my life. So I had my brother, and even the people in the book who I write about, you know, having difficult interactions with, or people who harmed me. In between those, like my mom was really supportive and loving. like if I brought home a B on a test, she would celebrate that and tell me I was really smart. And if I wrote something, she wanted to hear it. I think for all of the things that went wrong in my life, I had a lot of that. I had a lot of people who believed in me and told me that like you can be anything. And given the circumstances, I was really limited in my options, but just having people, bolster my confidence. I had teachers who like took me aside and checked on me and were really present with my work. And my brother was there with me, and just having someone to go through it with, even when we had little pockets of our lives where we were thinking about them very differently. I had a comrade through all of it. And then a lot of it too was just coping mechanisms. I was dissociating through a lot of things. And I think just being able to sit back and escape into my head or escape into a book or a movie or whatever, that made all the difference. And then as I got older, I had to learn to let go of that, but it helped me while it helped me.
How do you ditch those coping mechanisms? Do you consider that part of the healing process, or is it something that I guess comes as a result of doing the work?
Yeah, I definitely think it's part of healing. At least for me, I find myself falling back into those habits because, again, my brain formed around escaping and withdrawing and these things that kept me safe when I needed them. But now as an adult, if I'm, struggling, having a hard day, I feel myself starting to like revert to daydreams or, just wanting to escape in some way. And so a lot of recovery has just been forcing myself to be present and knowing like now I have the power in my life to actually control what happens. I mean, for the most part, to control what happens. Yeah, it's really hard. It feels like just constantly fighting my brain, which is trying to do the thing that it thinks is going to keep me safe. But I'm out here on the front lines saying like, no, I know what to do now. We don't have to escape.
Well, what do you hope readers most take away from this book?
I hope that people also try and get that perspective, like look back at the habits you've developed, look at the relationships you've had modeled for you, and try and find a better way. And also understand that like we're all capable of hurting the people in our lives, and the people who love us and treat us really well are capable of hurting us. And it's an option to, stop perpetuating that on each other and treat yourself better and, have hope and love and compassion.
You mentioned, of course, that writing is the way that you like to process things. Lastly, any writing advice for those who might be trying to do the same?
Yeah. When I was writing the book, I think it was going to be hard regardless of how much therapy I went to and all of my grounding exercises and everything. But, I did go to therapy. So if I was having trouble with something I was processing on the page, I knew I could talk to my therapist about it. And in addition to helping me just like process it and feel okay, it also helped me write. So I highly recommend being in therapy if you're writing nonfiction, particularly about hard times in your life. And then find something when you're not writing that is tactile. I ran a lot. I went on long walks. I did puzzles. I would deep clean my house and try to be mindful while doing all of those things, because writing a book is a very cerebral experience, and you can get really trapped in your mind and you're sitting with your past. So it's good to find a way to bring yourself back to the present and stay grounded. And then also remember to eat. I don't know how many other people have that problem, but when I'm really deep in writing, I will forget to eat. So I highly recommend getting a Jeff to keep you fed.
Brittany Means is the author of Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways. It's out now through Zibby Books, and you can learn more about Means at her website, brittanymeans.com. Brittany, thanks for joining us.
I just really appreciate your time. Thank you.
We're going to let our next guest take it away now with a tribute to resiliency in all forms. Robin Spielberg is an award-winning pianist, Steinway artist, composer, and mental health advocate. With a catalog of 24 records spanning 4 decades, she's taken on everything from the classics to Broadway and modern pop music. Her work has been featured in hospitals across the country through the Care Channel, and her previous record, a collection of pop covers called Downtown, peaked at number 5 on Billboard's classic crossover chart. For her newest release, titled By Way of the Wind, Spielberg enlists the help of the Budapest Scoring Orchestra to give some of her favorite original works the symphonic treatment she always had in mind.
I wanted the listener to experience the journey that I feel of what it takes to move through the world. I know that sounds very, very general, but I use the title By Way of the Wind to describe how very often we are moved by unseen forces, right? Like the wind, right? Sometimes it feels in life like someone has their hand on your back. The wind is at your back. That's in the Irish blessing. May the wind be at your back. Sometimes we face a headwind in life or a tornado or things are not going our way and we seem to be fighting. So I just felt that the wind really described all of those unseen forces in our lives and the resiliency that it takes to be able to go through this journey of life.
What were some of the unseen forces that have played a role in your life?
Oh gosh, that really hits home. I feel like there have been many unseen forces in my own life. My daughter, who is now 25, our daughter was born very, very prematurely. She was the surviving twin and spent 4 months in the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. It was a very, very difficult period that required a lot of hope and positive thinking. And of course, the wonderful work of physicians. And not only did she get through it, did we all get through it, she thrived. She needed heart surgery. She had a traumatic brain injury. She had some learning disorders. The medical professionals didn't think she'd be able to walk, talk, hear, or see, never mind go through public school, becoming an honor student, and even going to college. So she defied the odds. And it just always made me feel as her mother that there was a reason that maybe I couldn't see that wasn't in front of me for her to be here. There's a reason, there's a purpose, there's a need for her spirit in this world. That's one example. But there are many. There's also in the recording itself, one of my favorites, if I'm able to have a favorite child, is the piece called A Song for Jenny, which I subtitled We're Almost There. Jenny was my grandmother, and she lived to age 100. She emigrated here from Eastern Europe, and she came over in 1929, right before the stock market crash. Her husband, my grandfather, came here first. Robin Spielberg, I'm named for him. And Robin was a musician. He was a flute player. His brother, Herman Spielberg, was a violinist, and they both were professional musicians. They worked with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. They worked with the Cleveland Symphony. They worked for Toscanini and the NBC Symphony. Their lives required that they have a great deal of hope, belief, faith, and of course, resilience. I think that if you are to name, what is the most important quality for a person to have to, succeed in life and have a good life, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a high GPA or super smarts or great genetics. I would say resiliency, the ability to bounce back, get back on the horse, whatever metaphor you want to use, when times are tough.
How do we go about becoming more resilient, I guess? What are the things that have helped you?
Yeah, resiliency, it's kind of this word that gets tossed around, and I wish it was something that was teachable, but it's not. It's a lot like bravery, right? I think bravery is really important, stepping out of your comfort zone and showing up and taking risks. But bravery, I always say, is a muscle that you have to exercise, just like a bicep. And the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And resiliency is a lot the same. If you're a human being, you are going to experience loss and disappointment, right? And challenges. And there are so many ways we can hold something in our minds if we choose, and we can choose that. We might not be able to choose what happens to us, all of our experiences, but we can choose how we hold them in our minds. And so when I'm faced with, an unbelievable challenge, instead of being upset about it or destroyed by it, that I'm not having my way, I look at it as a teaching moment of, hey, this is what the universe gave me. This is my life experience in a way. This is my journey, and I can do with it what I wish to do with it. I can hold it in a way that is more positive. How can I do that? So I ask myself those very questions. And certainly there's nothing like a good cry. Certainly during the pandemic, I did a lot of crying when my tour fell down and things were difficult. But I think, a good example. The pandemic came and a lot of musicians quit. A lot of bands broke up. A lot of people stopped practicing. I decided that, well, what's the opportunity here? I might be called an unessential worker by the government during this time, but I can't control that, but I can compose and I can arrange music and I can hit go live on my iPhone and give a concert, a free stream to people. I can still practice my instrument. I could still get better at what I do. There's always room and a need for beauty in the world. So that was a way that I was personally able to practice resiliency.
Are you still doing those weekly live performances online?
I am. I mean, I know people said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're still doing those. That was such a fad. It's so over. But, not for me. I actually love it. And I cannot believe the community that was created because I do it. I mean, I think a lot of the people tune in now, not even to watch me, but just to see each other and talk to each other on the feed. It's really funny. My husband produces it and we moved to it grew to a 5-camera shoot. We always choose a different theme. This Friday, probably we'll choose something spooky because Halloween's coming up. So songs that are scary. Really, that going live really helped this project in a way because I started talking about it. They talk about how you manifest something. And I started talking about how I always wanted to do an orchestral project. And people would write in, yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? Here's $5 in the tip jar to get you started. And it was enough to be able to hire an orchestrator to get, the first piece done.
Very cool. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about your advocacy work, too. You're a national artist spokesperson for the American Music Therapy Association. You've done TED Talks on the subject. I guess just tell me a little about your work on that front and how you got into music therapy.
I first discovered them when our daughter was in the NICU. And we noticed that when my music was playing near her incubator, that her vital signs had improved. Her blood oxygen levels increased and her heart rate stabilized, her blood pressure stabilized. And it wasn't just a one-time thing, it was every single time my music was on. And I understand how people I have preference for music, right? When you hear music that you like, that you're exercising to, you might have a better workout, or you might listen to something that makes you feel more calm, or you put on a good cry song when you want to cry. But I really had trouble understanding how music was having this very physical and medical effect on such a tiny, tiny being. I mean, Valerie was less than 1 pound.
Wow.
So I did some research and I found a book that I dove into. Dr. Jane Stanley wrote it. It's called Music and the Premature Infant. Did a deep dive on that, discovered that she was part of the American Music Therapy Association. I reached out to them and I started doing some more research and discovered not only is there a lot of scientific evidence about the uses of music in the NICU, but so many uses of music in medical applications. And this includes people with ADHD, people with autism, people with Parkinson's, people going through chemotherapy. I mean, so many uses, anxiety. I just became extremely interested in that. And now I do a lot of work with music and memory. When I go on tour, I often go into a nursing home or senior care facility or memory unit and play songs from yesteryear. And it is a very, very gratifying experience. I just did this last week in Florida, and it's pretty amazing. You see a group of people come in that are, older. Some of them are wheelchair bound or in stretchers and kind of expressionless. You don't know what to expect. And as soon as I start playing, songs from the Great American Songbook and Americana music and songs from Broadway, people start coming to life and they start singing the words. Music it's very powerful. It's not just one part of our brains. Our whole brains are wired for music. So I find that really interesting. And of course, we were using this with our own daughter. I mentioned earlier in our conversation, she had a traumatic brain injury and she had trouble with her short-term memory. This wasn't so good for school, right? For studying for tests. But when I set the curriculum to music, she was able to remember everything. And she went from being a C/D student to an A student.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. I mean, it makes sense, right? We don't teach little ones who are 4 years old, here, memorize these 26 letters in a row. We give them the alphabet song.
You end the new record with a 3-movement piece called the New Freedom Suite. What was your inspiration there?
Well, the New Freedom Suite is really my tribute to soldiers and to veterans. And it was inspired by 3 different times of war over the decades. So I literally wrote, it's 3 movements. And I composed each movement about a decade apart. The first one, Memories of Utopia, has the seeds from a play I was working on in 1987, believe it or not. I'm a founding member of the Atlantic Theater Company, and in addition to being an actor in the ensemble, I often wrote the music for the scene changes. And this was we were doing a play by John Guare that was set in the Civil War period. And the lead character has this beautiful monologue where she speaks of creating this utopian society. So Memories of Utopia is really how people, when they're studying, when you're young and you study conflicts like war, you have this utopian idea that, okay, we're going to fight and then the good side's going to win and everything's going to be perfect, right? And that's kind of how it's all tied up in a bow in that movement. And then the second movement is called Soldier's Journey, and I composed that during the Persian Gulf War. It was more about, wow, all of these people are now being called up and headed for the unknown. It still has a little bit of an optimism to it, that they think they're going in and going to, fight for the right and everything will work out just fine. But that was also a very, very difficult war and full of naivete. And then the third one is more recent, One Step Closer. I began that during the Ukraine war. And I've come to realize, like I'm sure many people, after you've lived a number of years on this planet, that there really is no winning in war. We can only hope to become one step closer to freedom, one step closer to where we want to be. We might never live to see the outcome that we want, but we as humans can work toward being one step closer. And this doesn't just apply to veterans or people who have served. It applies to anyone who is searching for a new freedom in their lives. May we all be one step closer to the person we want to ultimately be.
Pianist and composer Robin Spielberg's new record is called By Way of the Wind. She'll be playing the record in full, including her New Freedom Suite, with a full orchestra at the Brazo Sport College campus in Lake Jackson, Texas on Veterans Day. You can also catch her live from her piano every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern on her YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Bandcamp, and LinkedIn channels. If you want to learn more about her work, go to robinspielberg.com. Finally, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. In Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the Phelps Cancer Center is getting ready to hold a reception for an art show titled An October Retrospective, Art by Breast Cancer Survivors. Organizer Francesca Olson is a North Adams resident, recent breast cancer survivor, and an artist. Quilts that she produced during her arduous treatments will hang alongside work from 3 other local artists who also explored the experience of breast cancer creatively. Olson recently told WAMC's Josh Landis that the show is about examining the complexities of life with cancer, as well as deepening the collective understanding of those who survive it.
While I was going through cancer treatment last year, I went through chemo, I had a mastectomy, and I had radiation. I really needed to put my energy and my feelings into something outside of myself. And as an artist, that was going to be art. So I'm a quilter, and I took to quilting and I created 3 large quilts based on medieval and tarot card imagery that represent each of those treatments, chemo, surgery, and radiation. So one of them, the surgery one, looks like swords. The chemo one is represented by cups. It's called alchemy. There's some like alchemy lines coming out of it. And the radiation one is inspired by the old school radiation symbol, not the bomb shelter one, but the like wiggly lion one. So they all kind of speak together in color. And when I was finished with them, I thought, well, maybe I could get them hung at the cancer center so that other people could see something that somebody else created as they went through the hell that is going through cancer treatment. And the Cancer Center said yes, which I'm very thankful for, but I wanted it to be a little bit more democratic than just me showing my work. So I've connected with tons of other survivors and people in treatment currently. And so I put out a call to see if anybody else would like to stand with me and submit their art.
Tell us a little bit about some of these folks who are also sharing their experiences with breast cancer through art.
Here in the Berkshires, there are so many artists, which means that the demographic concentration of cancer survivors who are artists is obviously going to be higher. And the point of showing this art together is to show that we are people with complete lives who are still doing deep, constructive things with ourselves, who are asking really important questions about the world, etc. So I'm really excited to have Karen Stack on display. She just had a show in downtown North Adams, and she was generous enough to hook us up with a piece. She has done amazing art related to her cancer journey in the past, so she's fairly well known. Martha Flood has also submitted a quilt. She's a textile artist and designer who used to have a shop on Eagle Street in North Adams. And my friend Kate Wunsch, who actually went through treatment at the exact same time I did, she has a beautiful self-portrait photograph in this show. And she and I met through a mutual friend, because our mutual friend knew that we were both going through chemo at the same time, and we became part of a chemo support group text, and it was wonderful. So I'm really happy that her art is going to be here.
What are you hoping folks take away from this gallery?
I want them to understand that the time of treatment can be spent in a constructive way. I think a lot of people who haven't gone through this think that what we're doing while we go through all this chemo and radiation is just like sit there and suffer, but that's really not the case. Like, people who are sick are the same people, they're just sick. So I'd love to take that away. And I would love to remind people that, you know, breast cancer is really common. 1 in 8 women get breast cancer. So 1 in 8 women are out there going back into their lives and doing what they used to do every day, and, you know, feeling out what it's like to be on the other side of that line. That's really important to me, too.
That was artist Francesca Olson speaking with WAMC's Josh Landis. You've been listening to 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can stay in the loop on all of WAMC's shows by signing up for our weekly newsletter Airwaves at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King for 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. The nightmare down the hallway, I had to learn how to look away. I lost my cool, no electricity, hot rain on the concrete, sweet melting little girl dreams. They said